Doing good. Let me know if you're live here, if you're watching. Give me a hi. Let me know where you're from. Okay, I think I need to. Hi, everybody. How are you doing? Give me a hi. Let me know if you're here. Hi, Raki. So let me just show it here so we can see. Hi, Amrita. And you're from Tindivanam. We're getting a lot of responses from Facebook. I hope you're there on YouTube as well. Very good evening and very warm welcome to this amazing session. We're going to discuss a lot about soap making. So it's the hot sauce today. Everybody is trying to make handmade soaps, and yes, it's a 3.5 billion-dollar industry that's rapidly growing. So welcome, Sarika. How are you doing? Hi, Komal. And I see a lot of Facebook users. uh, Great. Okay, let me see if I get some chat here. Okay, great. So tell me, what kind of soaps do you make? Okay, before we start, a quick introduction for those of you who don't know me. This is Akshata from Soappreneurs, and I help small businesses, handmade soap businesses, create into legit legal brands. And there are lots of myths and over information on social media that is not required. So this session is my part of giving back to my society and my community of soapers, where I'm bringing in some deep knowledge of soaps and how you can actually make your soaps better. So quickly tell me, what kind of soaps do you make? You can either make melt and pour soaps, you can make cold process soaps, or you can make hot process soaps. So what kind of soaps are you making nowadays, and how has been your experience? So hi there. So I see a lot of new people. We will have a Q&A session at the end, and you can feel free to reach out for any doubts or queries anytime. Okay, so we have someone making melt and pour and cold process soap, melt and pour soap. So I'm just reading your comments. It's great. Let me just say. Okay, and CP. I too love CP. Just make sure. Okay, so Bhagyalakshmi, welcome. You love CP soaps. I too love CP soaps. It's one of my favorites. I can make like hundreds of CP soaps. Okay, want to talk to you about hot process? Yes, definitely we can talk about hot process. Cold process soaps, hot process in these days. Yes, if you're a part of my community, we just opened up the Pandora box of hot process soap making, and how simple and easy and effective it can be. But you really have to have some experience of making cold process first before you begin with hot process, because it's really hot while working. Okay, so if you guys are ready, I want you to take your pen and notepads and start making notes. Okay, if you're watching the recording, or if you want to take notes, you can also drop it in the comment section, so you can revisit the video and check out for your notes. So are we all ready to start off with today's learning? If you're ready, just type in ready in your chat sections and let me know if you're ready. So we're going to start some interesting and very important tips. So we have soap makers from all over the world. All over India itself, the climate is changing so rapidly that we see our soaps misbehaving and not the way we like it to be. Okay, so great to have all of you here. I see a lot of ready. The chat section booming up. Pretty excited to have you all here. And let's begin the journey. If you're hearing a lot of kids playing, I'm working from home, so please excuse. It's everyone who's working from home. That's the part of and parcel of work today. So great. So first and foremost, let's break the biggest myth of handmade soaps, especially when you're making with oils and lye. If you're someone who has not yet started soap making, soap is made with lye, that is sodium or potassium hydroxide, and oils. So when you mix those, you get soap, glycerine, and water. So the pH of these soaps are pretty high, somewhere around 9 to 10, and our skin pH is around 5.5. So are these soaps really suitable? We are going to cover that in tomorrow's section, that is your facial skin versus your body skin. Do watch out tomorrow and don't miss. So when the pH of soap is really high, now if you have some kind of chemistry knowledge, we know that adding citric acid basically reduces the pH. But in soap, the chemistry of this is absolutely different. Okay, you might have read somewhere, you might have heard someone saying that, okay, you can add citric acid to your soaps and the pH of the soap will go down. Now, by nature of science, soap is an alkaline product which is meant to have pH above 7. Okay. If the pH drops too much, then there is always a tendency that your soap will break into salt and water. Okay. That's the chemistry behind it. So, what exactly happens when you add citric acid, or nowadays there is a craze of people adding bioenzyme, the fruit enzyme or the citrus enzyme. People add lemon juice, people add yogurt, people add curd to the soap making process. So what exactly happens when you add acidic ingredients, especially something like citric acid, into your soap making process? How do we add it and how to use? This is your tip number one. I hope you're making notes. I hope you're taking notes. So this is what happens. This is the wonder of science that I'm trying to put in front of you in a very simpler manner. So when you add citric acid to your lye solution or your oils in the process of soap making, the citric acid reacts with the lye, that is sodium or potassium hydroxide, and converts into sodium citrate or potassium citrate. Now, this sodium or potassium citrate actually are chelators. Okay, they are chelating agents. So they do the work of what a commercial EDTA or tetrasodium EDTA does. So you are actually creating a natural just by adding citric acid or anything citrus to your soap making. I wouldn't recommend adding lemon because we don't know what is the citric acid amount and how much you are adding. Now, what happens and what is the work of sodium or potassium citrate? Now, sodium and potassium citrate are basically chelators, as I said. So, what they're going to do, they're like one big magnet which are going to pull all the metal ions from your soap or the mixture of ingredients. Now you are adding oils, you are adding water, you are adding your fragrance. There are traces of small amount of metal ions. Okay. Now these metal ions, basically we call them as free radicals. So they're just freely moving, ready to just attach to someone and convert it to something nasty. Now it can cause you DOS, it can cause rancidity in your soaps. Now when you have a chelator and when you have a natural chelator, It's going to bind these metal ions, lying here and there everywhere. It's like, you have these metal balls and you hold a magnet and everything, it will come and hold back, right? And so it's similar to that. It's going to hold back all the metal ions, making sure that there is nothing roaming without any any string attached, okay, no loose wires there, so that it can't spoil the soap. So this is your tip number one, that you can add citric acid to your soaps to make sure that you have a natural chelator. Now the question is, how do we add it? Okay, so is the first point clear to everybody? If it's clear, just type in clear. Now, how do we go about adding this citric acid? Okay, so now we understand that when we add citric acid, it is going to react with your sodium hydroxide. Hi, everybody. So that means some amount of sodium hydroxide, which is supposed to react with your oils to convert into soap, is now used up by citric acid. So that means you need to replace or add an additional sodium hydroxide. So how much of citric acid should you be using? Okay, you should use ideally 1% citric acid, 1% of your total amount of oil. So if you have like 100 grams of oil, so use 1 gram of citric acid. Now, 1 gram of citric acid uses 6 grams of sodium hydroxide. Okay, that means if you're using 1 gram of citric acid while making your soap, you add an additional 6 grams of sodium hydroxide above your formula. So let's say your formula needs 30 grams of lye, so you are going to add 36 grams of lye, so compensate to the lye that has been used. Okay, if it's super clear, and if you think that this is a wow kind of information, just type in wow and type in what you learned. Okay, so you can type it in the comment section. So 1 gram of citric acid reacts with 6 grams of sodium hydroxide. So you need to replace. Okay, whatever you're learning, put this in the comment section so that you don't forget it. Okay, now you can, now for bar soap, okay, you can add up to 1.5 to 2% of citric acid, and you can, for liquid soap, you can add up to 1%. Okay, yes. So for potassium hydroxide, because potassium hydroxide is a weaker alkaline, okay, so 1 gram of citric acid consumes like 8 grams of potassium hydroxide. That is your KOH. Okay, so it's 1/8. So you need to compensate with additional 8 grams of potassium hydroxide. Okay, so hello to everybody, and wow, it's great to see you all. So the more you ask me questions, the more you're going to get. Okay, if you're enjoying this session, give me a like, give me some love, and feel free to share in any of your groups you feel that this information is going to be useful to other soapers. So are we ready for the next point? Are we ready for the next point? The next point is like the important point. Yes, it's Rupa. It is 1% of the oils. So because we are calculating lye based on the oils that we use, so we are going to use citric acid also based on the oils that we use. So 1 gram sodium hydroxide reacts with 6 grams of NaOH. Oh, sorry. 1 gram of citric acid consumes 6 grams of sodium hydroxide. 1 gram of citric acid consumes 8 grams of potassium hydroxide. So Tip number one is, if you want to avoid unnecessary reactions in your soap, add 2% of citric acid, 2% of your oil weight of citric acid to your soap making process, and add an additional amount of sodium hydroxide, or if you're making a dual lye method, sodium and potassium hydroxide. For liquid soaps, use 1% citric acid as per weight of oil, and add additional sodium or potassium hydroxide. Okay, so that finishes our point number one. Give me a big wow in the chat section so that we can go to the next tip. Are you ready for the tip number one? I hope you are, and I know you are. Okay, so it's really interesting to learn all these new things, and when you use it, you find it more interesting. Okay, so great. So myth number one busted: adding citric acid does not reduce the pH of your soap. Adding citric acid creates chelators like potassium and sodium citrate that help in stability of your soap, avoiding unnecessary reactions, right? So let's get straight into point number two. So point number two, we are discussing about DOS. Okay. Now these are dreaded orange spots that nobody knows why they are formed. So I'm going to decipher why these DOS forms. Okay. So just type in DOS in the chat section if you are ready for this next point. Now, some of you might be watching me live on YouTube. Some of you might be watching me live on Facebook groups or my page. If you have any doubts, if you want to connect, and if you're really serious about taking the small home business into an actual legal profitable business, send me a hi in the, ping me on the messenger, and I will invite you to my private Soapreneurs Lifestyle Network, where we are building the brand journey for so many entrepreneurs. Right. If you're watching on YouTube, you can just write to me at support@kiasskin.com. I'm going to leave it in the description below so that you can reach out to me. Okay, great. So we all know, now getting back to the DOS point, we all know that fatty acids, that is the oils, have components that are fatty acid. They are like building blocks of oils. So there are two types of fatty acids. One is saturated, the other one is unsaturated. I'll just see if I can get the caption up. Okay, so we are gonna let me see. Okay. Give me 1 second. I'm just checking if I can get the. Okay. All right, great. Thank you for those who posted the notes in the chat section. I can't see your name, but thank you so much. Now, the next step, that is, you're talking about DOS. So we have saturated fatty acid and unsaturated fatty acids, right? So saturated fatty acids have single bonds. It's like, C molecule, then there's a single bond, there's another C molecule. So basically these saturated fatty acids are really tightly packed. Okay, so it's not very easy for them to react with other things. So it's like consider a trunk of a tree. Okay, is it easy to cut it down, or is it easy to shake the tree? Absolutely not. But when you have those tiny branches, it is very easy to cut it, or just shake the branch or move it. So saturated fatty acids are like those trunk of trees where it's difficult for other things to react to it. And the unsaturated fatty acids have two double bonds. Okay, they have more than one carbon bond basically. So in unsaturated fatty acids, you have something like monosaturated and polysaturated. So basically, monosaturated means you have one double bond. That means it's like a branch. Okay, so like saturated fatty acids are the trunk of the tree. Monosaturated fatty acid is a branch, okay, which is thicker but still movable. Now, your polysaturated fatty acids are like, those branchlets, okay, those stems that come out of your branch. So, polysaturated fatty acids have more number of double bonds. So, that means they have more weaker links for someone to come and, react, or it's like, someone is coming and holding hand with those bonds. Okay, so consider it in a very simpler manner that saturated fatty acid is like the trunk, which is really strong, so it doesn't allow other things to move it, or shake its presence. But the monosaturated acids are the branch of the tree, which is stronger but not very strong enough. Okay, it does have one loose link. Polyunsaturated, sorry, mono unsaturated and poly unsaturated. So polyunsaturated have more weaker links. So they are like those tiny twigs that come out of the branch. So they have two, three double bonds. So they allow the reaction. Now DOS is simply formed by oxidation. That means reaction with oxygen. So how do we store our cold process or hot process soaps? We store them open. Okay, we want the water to go out, but at the same time we have oxygen all around. So the oxygen has the tendency to react with the super fat or the leftover oil that you have. Okay, when this reacts, now the reaction can happen with oxygen, which we call oxidation, that everybody knows, vitamin C creams, avoiding oxidation, avoiding spoilage of oil. So basically it's a rancidity. So it is not only the oxygen but also the hydrogen that can react. Okay, so it's not enough if you add an antioxidant like vitamin E in your soap. You need to supplement it with something that is much stronger to avoid the hydrogen reaction as well. Now we know the source. The source of the issue is those tiny twigs, that is the polyunsaturated acids. So what are these? If you look at the fatty acid profile, stearic acid, palmitic acid, myristic acid, these acids are basically your saturated fatty acids. So these are not the issues. Okay. Now, if we go to polyunsaturated fatty acids, we have oleic acid, racinoic acid. Then comes the danger. The danger ones are the linoleic acid and linolenic acid, which have 2 and 3 weaker links. Okay, so it's like stearic acid, palmitic acid, myristic acid, oleic acid. Okay, it's like your trunk and you have one branch, oleic acid, racinoic acid, and there's one tiny branch that is coming out, that is your linolenic and linolenic acid. Now these two are the ones that are the weaker links in your soap. If you can somehow change your formula reduce the values of these as much as possible. Also, adding citric acid is going to make your soaps much preventable than having these DOS. Okay, did your mind just blow away? If you're blown up by this information, just type in blown up. Let's go to point number 3. Let's go to point number 3. Now, there is a delay with what I talk and when you reply. So, I'll just have to wait for you to reply, and so I can see that you have understood. So, tip number 2 is keep linoleic acid and linoleic acid. Okay, linoleic and linolenic acid, the last two in your fatty acid profile, to keep it as simple as possible, as low as possible. Okay, if you're finding this video informational, you want others also, to have benefit of this, go ahead and share it in all the groups that you're there. We would like to help and reach as many people as possible so that we can give them the best of the information with the right idea. Okay, great. So next tip, so I'm sure you're ready for tip number 3. Let's get to tip number 3, and the very common ingredient that we are going to talk about is sugar. Yeah, how many of you here use sugar in your soaps? So we are specifically talking about cold process and hot process, because melt and pour is not my very favorite, because there's not much I can do in terms of creating the formula. Okay, but it's more about the artistic creativity, where I'm concerned about the quality creativity. So I have more love towards the cold process and the hot process methods. So there's a question: what is the ideal number of these two in soap cal? The general calculation says that you have to keep it below 18 together, but linoleic acid has two weak links, okay, and linolenic acid have three weak links. So try to keep the linolenic as low as possible, okay, and linoleic you cannot avoid, because they are part of so many other other oils, so you cannot absolutely avoid these fatty acids. But yes, the overall numbers, when you're making a formula, at the bottom you have a part where you have these fatty acid profiles. Just go there, see, and make sure they are like base minimum. Okay. Yes, sugar. So why do we use sugar? Sugar as replacement of sorbitol. Komal, I was trying to tell you something else. Okay, yes, sugar. So I'm not going to go deep into the chemistry of sugar, but just to give you a brief up, you have glucose, sucrose, lactose. Okay, the three. Sorry, fructose, lactose, and glucose. Okay, so when you are actually using milk, okay, so that is lactose. It is, sugar is nothing but basically polysaccharide. Okay, in much simpler ways, sugar is basically a carbohydrate. Okay, sugar is basically a carbohydrate. So you know, your lactose, that means the sugar that you have in milk, like it can be goat's milk, it can be cow's milk. Now both these milk actually behave the same way. Okay, it can come from goat or buffalo or camel, but in when you're adding it to the soap, the sugar is what matters. So the lactose is very much similar to your table salt. Okay, now when people say that adding sugar boosts lather, what does it exactly mean? Adding sugar is actually increasing the hydrophilic affinity of the soap. That means it is attracting more moisture. Okay, so it's hydro means water, philic means love. Okay, liking towards someone. So your sugar will say the moisture, please come to me. Okay, at the same time when you're washing, the bubbles that they are formed, okay, it works really well with soft water. Okay, so if you want your soaps to work well with hard water, make sure you have a chelator along with your sugar. Okay, now the point is, when we are adding this sugar, is it really that good? Okay, it's like the favorite ingredient of so many soapers across the globe, and trust me, it is. But there is also a downside to it. Okay, the downside is that when you add too much sugar, you already have glycerine coming out of your soap, which is a humectant. Basically, that means it is attracting moisture from the atmosphere. Okay. The second point is, you have sugar in your soap to hold on to your moisture. That means the longevity of your soap actually reduces when you use too much of sugar. So be mindful of how much sugar you use. And tip number 3 is, use sugar mindfully. Also, make a note of different kinds of sugar in your additives. Okay, now your watermelon, your papaya, your milk, your honey, everything has different kinds of sugar and in different variations. So you really need to calculate how much sugar is going inside and how much of additive replacement you can do to get that best soap. And tip number 3, extension, is the best ingredient or the replacement that I know for sugar is sorbitol. Okay, sorbitol is natural. It's not typical chemical basically. Sorbitol also helps in providing moisturization that the sugar can not give that much. Okay, additional to that, the lather and the foam that is produced in addition to sugar is much better. So the lather that you get from sorbitol is much better when you add use sugar. So you can use up to 3% of sorbitol in your hard soaps and up to 1 to 1.5% of sorbitol in your liquid soaps. This is based on my experience. Okay, so if you want to learn more, you can also always reach out to me. Great. So is the tip number 3 done? If you understood, just comment in the chat section what you learned about tip number 3. Drop in the chat section what you learned about tip number 3. So, okay, great. Sarika, I hope you all are taking notes. You can always come back and watch the video again, but it's good if you write, you always remember. Okay, now in hot process soap, this is tip number 4. So tip number 4 for today is hot process soap What kind of um, what kind of super fat ingredient should you use for hot process soap? Now we know that whatever we add in hot process post the cook um, will not be reacting. That means you have a lot of leftover oils ready to react with your oxygen and hydrogen in your curing period. Okay. So, what kind of ingredient? Now, this is a question. Okay. What kind of oils or what kind of fatty acid based oil should you choose for your hot process super fatting value? Okay, like after the cook you want to add something as your super fat value. What kind of an oil should it be? So let me give you some tips. Okay, something that is high in stearic palmitic acid, that is A. B, something that is high in oleic acid. C, something that is high in linolenic and linoic acid. Now, if you have understood the tip number one, you can answer the tip number three. So, which particular type of superfat should you choose for hot processed post cook? So, now, very good answer. I will wait for a couple of other people also to answer. Now, if you're joining new here, a lot of people coming in. Hi, this is Akshata from Soapreneurs. We're discussing 5 tips on how you can make your soaps really amazing. Okay. So you should really have the trunk. Okay. Castor oil is high in ricinoic acid, which is like the branch. Okay. So it has one weak link. So there are chances of the oxidation or reaction with hydrogen that can happen. Okay, so the answer is, drum rolls, the answer is some saturated fatty acids or anything that has a high amount of saturated fatty acid. Okay, stearic acid is excellent. Okay, it gives you good moisturization. That is why your shave soaps and shaving creams are filled with stearic acid. Okay, your foot balms, your foot creams are filled with stearic acid because it can give you a lot of moisturization. Okay, because it's not going to stay, so no issues of commodogeneity or your skin pores clogging or any issue like that. It's just a soap, but at least you're avoiding the damage that it can cause to your soap. Great. So if you're done with your point number 4, okay, just type in amazing point 4 and we will head to point number 5. So those who have joined new, let me just go and check your comments. Okay, I'm not sure if it is showing live on my group. Let me just refresh this page. So if you're watching us for the first time, you can like and follow our page, Soapreneurs, on Instagram and Facebook. I help handmade soap businesses develop into legal cosmetic brands. And trust me when I say this, I have made all the startup mistakes and got a very good lesson. Okay. So I've done all the mistakes that you can think of, and I can tell you how to avoid those costly mistakes. So if you're interested and like this journey and want to create a legal cosmetic brand or a handmade soap brand in small quantity, do reach out, give me a hi on messenger or write to me at connect@kiaskin.com. I will send you a private link to my personal group where we are developing so many amazing brands. All right, great. So, coming to point number 5. So, we have some drum rolls. So, coming to point number 5, always, always store and cure your soaps with different fragrance far from each other. Okay, you may or may not realize it, but let's say I have a lavender beautiful fragrance and I keep a peppermint fragrance next to it. I'm curing it in lines very close to each other. After 3 months, you come and see that both the fragrances would have mixed up. Okay, so if you have fragrances that on are similar note, okay, similar fragrances, like you have floral fragrances in couple of soap, you can, yes, stack them close to each other. If you have some woody kind of fragrance, like something like patchouli or petrichor or something like that, keep it in a separate stack. Okay, never ever use metal based drying trays or metal places, unless your tray or your storing area is 100% pure SS304 is what we use basically. So if, unless it's a stainless steel 304, you just go ahead with plastic linings. Or if you can't find anything, take a butter paper, place it on your curing area, and then place your soaps. Because even where you're placing your soaps in close to metal or non-pure metals, these metals, as I told you, you have these metal ions inside. They are ready to react. Now these metals are going to react with your soap and spoil your soap, so you will lead to DOS. So tip number 5 is place your common fragrance soaps together, while either curing or storing, and always use a butter paper below and make sure there is ton of air flowing, and turn it. Okay, so super duper session that we had. Let's recap on all the 5 points. Now I'm gonna sip some water, and I want you to tell me what are the 5 things that you learned today. 5 super tips that you learned today, and let me know if this session was useful for you. If you want me to do any other such sessions, drop it in the comment section. Let me know how else, how better can I help you, and what queries and doubts do you have. So those who are joining new, very warm welcome. Please do watch the recap. So what are the 5 tips that you learned today? What are the 5 tips that you learned today? Now, I will have to wait for your comments to come in. Thank you so much, Dr. Bhagyalakshmi. Amazing to have you here. Yes, Jyoti, I will take your question. Please ask your question. If you have any question, please drop it in the comment section. So I'll go on for another 5-10 minutes to answer your questions. Let me see what you have. Yes. So, how can I help you? Now, so many of you must be trying so many different things. Don't worry. If you, this is This is my learning, okay, from being in the soap industry for 10 years and doing all the mistakes. When we try to do so many different things at a time, we actually are not able to focus on any one thing. So I'm going to sip some water and be live with you. Put your questions so that I can answer for you. Now, this is a question from Vaishali. The fragrances of my soap don't last long. So, though we call that our soaps are natural, um, the only chemical ingredient that we have in our soaps is fragrances. Okay. Now, the fragrances are made of various chemical compounds, and these may vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. So, one way to hanger your fragrance is a very common practice that we use is mix your fragrance in your clays and then use clay. Okay. So that the fragrance stays a little longer. Also make sure that you are buying only soap stable fragrances, because lot of people use agarbatti fragrances and some skincare fragrances, some dhoop fragrances. These are not meant for soaps. Okay, they are not safe for skin, and their reactivity is also different. Now similar kind of chemical compounds can be created, create similar fragrances, but the composition of the compound can be completely different. So I hope that answers your question. Next question from Swarna is, what is the purpose of adding bioenzyme to soaps? I meant, what skin feel is it good for? Now, bioenzyme, now I have researched on bioenzyme for quite some time, and I can tell you that bioenzyme has very less citric acid content, okay, because it's a fermentation. So you can have either citric acid or lactic acid, and citric acid is basically 1 or less than 1%. Okay, so this is the question we are answering. What is the purpose of bioenzyme to soaps? It it just, as I explained in point number one, that when you're adding this bioenzyme, it is just going to convert it to a chelating agent and nothing much, because rest all is your citrus. Okay. Next question. Can you suggest some trusted supplier for CP soap stable? Atreya, we do supply CP stable soaps. Okay. You can reach out to us at support@kiaskin.com. I can just mention this for you here. Okay, you definitely have a lot of other suppliers too, so you can reach us at support@kiaskin.com for more details on the fragrances. Okay, but make sure you don't keep changing your vendors. There are a lot of other people. I'm sure someone can suggest you the other things, other people. Okay, adding citric acid, natural chelator. Okay, these are the points. Very good. Let me scroll up and see if you have any more questions. Okay, do we need to add sorbitol in lye? Now, sorbitol can be added to lye water because, again, it is sweet. It is going to increase the temperature, or you can add it to your oils as you prefer. The similar way that you add your sugar, sorry, either in your lye water or either in your oil. Just make sure that it's at the required temperature of how you need, and it's pretty heat stable. But still, I do prefer to add it in thin trays, where I've already worked with the batter and I know that now nothing can go wrong, and that's when I add sorbitol. How to make soaps to last longer? You need to work on the fatty acids that relate to the longevity of the soap. Okay. Did I miss any question? Okay, I'm just scrolling down and checking if I missed any question. How much sorbitol is to be added? So you can add, as I said, 3 to 4% in hot process, bar soaps, and 1 to 2% in liquid soaps. Okay. All right. So thank you, everybody, for joining. I hope you enjoyed this session. Give me a thumbs up. Show me some love if you like this session. If you found this session helpful, please share it with others who might need it. And if you need to connect with me, you can either send me a private message at the Sopreneurs page, or also reach us at support@kiaskin.com if you need any more help. If you're really serious about business and converting this homemade brand into a handmade cosmetic business with legal compliances, do reach out we can add you to a private community where we are nurturing many serious business owners. Thank you very much for joining today. We will meet tomorrow either on my blog or podcast or Facebook Live discussing the facial skin versus body skin, and how and why you should not use a handmade soap on your face, but it is absolutely fine when you are using it for your body. Thank you for joining today. Have a great evening and lots of love. Signing off.